Welcome, Pyre Monkey crew, to another installment of how to paint this lovely gem dragon that we've been working on. And today we're actually going to focus on the gems, right? It's all been leading up to this moment. I'm excited to get back. It's been a little while since I've been able to do some editing, and I appreciate all of your patience. Yeah, let's just jump right into it. The first thing that we're going to do is kind of like an overbrushing, almost like a dry brushing kind of technique. And the reason is we're really just trying to put an opaque bright white on there so that when we start coming over later with glazes of magenta and some layers of violet, then those white layers are going to kind of push through. It's going to give us a super bright, super intense color, which is really what we want, right? If we look at reference of gems, we'll see that, you know, there's a pattern to them, just like with most things, right? The difference is that the pattern is like a bunch of flat surfaces. So, but yeah, when we're painting these things, we want to create this illusion of transparency, that we can see the light filtering through the gems. It's tricky, right? Because gems are transparent and translucent, but they're also like really hard and rigid. And so we have to visually describe both of those things with our techniques. And so creating all of these layers of glazes and then more white and then more glazes over and over and over again starts to give that impression, which I think is really awesome. So, and that's why I went ahead and did it. So yeah, what I'm doing right here is now I'm coming through, I'm kind of keeping in mind where my light source is coming from. And I'm looking at all my gem faces here, and any of the gem faces that what I'm seeing would be about 45 degrees from that light source. They're getting painted entirely flat white. And again, if we look at reference, we'll see some of the facets of gems be completely reflective, totally the color of whatever the light source is that's impacting them. And so this is one of those weird shape language things that I've talked about before, but with gems in particular, is very, very important, because gem facets tend to be smooth and glossy. And because of that, they are really shining that light right back at you, right? And that's how we get that really pretty kind of sparkling disco ball effect if they get the light the right way. And it's also, again, what helps sell the illusion and impression of it being a gem. So now we're going to come in here with our first glaze. It's just the magenta color from Chimera. I wanted to show you there on my hand kind of the thinness, and we're just going to go over all of these gems a couple of times with just a full tinting. I mean, you could almost think of this as a wash if you really wanted to simplify it. I'm being a little bit more careful here, but you don't have to, especially if you're trying to go a little faster. I think it was too thin. I increased the consistency of it there just to help it cover a little bit more, because the pigment itself is like already very naturally transparent. And yeah, we're just going to go over all these gems. We're not erasing any of the work that we did before. We're just kind of adding transparent layers on top of it. And so that's what makes this technique really cool, is it's something that, you know, it can look and feel advanced when it's finished, right? And that's what you can see on the rest of the dragon. But the reality of it is that it's as simple as just kind of using your white in an effective way to create like the highlights and shadows, and then using these transparent true pigment tones to, you know, the best advantage that you possibly can. Coming in here with the second glaze. Glazing though, man, you just cannot get the same kind of color intensity with any other techniques than this kind of glazing. You just can't. I've been pretty sold on them in the past year or so after reading a book on the technique and learning more about how the old masters utilize them. And, you know, it's a lot of these techniques are why the paintings at museums feel so just astonishing. So now we're getting some violet here. This is a pure pigment transparent violet as well. And what I'm going to do, remember how we were talking before about the upper sides getting painted completely white? Now the bottom sides are going to be completely purple. And if you were to look from below, there'd probably be some light filtering through, but we still want to give some kind of impression of like a high and a low zone. And the way that we'll kind of work around that is just by adding in highlight zones and glazing over those with magenta, so it still feels like there's some kind of light passing through, but we still have to create some sense of volume because there still would be. It's one of the more tricky things about this technique, and in my head, all I'm trying to keep in mind is, hey, let's just simplify this, and the eye is going to be very responsive to creating that kind of overall pattern. And I'm sure you can tell just by the length of the video that this is nowhere near the end of the process. Like I said before, we're going to be edge highlighting, in some more white, and then glazing over that, and then edge highlighting again. And we're still, maybe only a third of the way through the process. And it's just really stacking and stacking and stacking. Sometimes it's just the same techniques over and over and over again that give just a super cool impression. What we're doing right now is we are coming through and we're just hitting those tops of the gems again just to kind of reestablish the white, and we'll do that a couple more times through this process. So now we're coming in here and edge highlighting. Now, this doesn't need to be a super, super delicate or careful edge highlighting at this point because it's going to be glazed over here momentarily. We just need to make sure that we're starting to pick out where all the edges are, just so that we know in the future, but also starting to give that impression of the fact that this is a hard surface, and hard surfaces tend to indicate really well where the hard lines are. And so this is again, it's not necessarily the most realistic way of depicting something, but it is the easiest way at a very small scale to show a person like, hey, this is a hard edge, especially because we're trying to sell something that's very, very tiny and giving it the impression of something very, very large, right? even with the smaller gems, we just want to try to pick out the edges, and if you slip up, if you get some more white somewhere where you didn't originally intend to, it's okay. It's not a big deal. Just keep moving forward. That's the same thing that I do. I tend to focus more on impression initially, for sure. Chasing perfection with this kind of thing, I mean, it's just not my style. I think you guys know that at this point. If you really want to labor over each gemstone, at the end, like when we get to the end of the process, or at least what I consider to the end of it, you're more than welcome to continue refining. The client wanted something that was my style, and I'm assuming that's why you guys are here as well, as you enjoy my style of painting. But I think that it's far more pleasurable to have impression and a good understanding of light and the fundamentals than something that's been labored over in terms of technique, just because you start to lose some of the soul and some of the wild nature of what this creature would be if you did that, right? Then again, this is all my personal opinion. I'm just trying to give you guys a little bit of a window into the way that my brain works, and hopefully it helps you work on your own projects, because that's why I'm here, you guys, is to inspire and help a little bit in my own humble way. So now we're coming back in with a glaze. Again, in this case, we're doing a tinting glaze, which is very akin to a wash, but just think of it as like a very, very, very light wash. If you get some into the recesses, that's okay. No big deal. What you don't want is like massive pooling of the paint, right? That's not what we're aiming for here. It's not that kind of wash. It's not like a super heavy wash. So yeah, we're just doing this a couple times. Something else too that we're gonna start doing here momentarily is trying to be a little bit more targeted with the wash or the glaze, because we want to start to add volume and add a little bit of depth in places that are a little bit more specific, instead of just generally hitting the whole thing. But for now, we're just hitting the whole enchilada. Coming back in now again with the edge highlighting. This time we are being very, very careful about the way that we are edge highlighting, or at least we're starting to become more careful about it. If we can get the lines thinner on top of the lines that we applied previously, even better, just because we want to give the eye different layers of depth, again, to increase that illusion of something being transparent and yet hard. coming through and I am kind of almost doing the opposite of edge highlighting, right? I'm going between each and every one of these gemstones, and I am making sure that they, you know, kind of have a darker line between each one. I'm using the same purple color that we've been using before, just in a far higher concentration, and I'm trying to be very, very careful. I switched to a thinner brush in order to do this, and this is one of those things that is absolutely essential. Like, this is one of the steps that you cannot mix. You know, you can not do as many rounds of the, you know, building up whites and glazing them down for sure, depending on how fast you want to go, but you can't skip this because it just clarifies everything to whoever's looking at it from, and this is important whether or not you're painting a gaming miniature or a really high level display miniature. Each material has to read independently from one another. Otherwise you end up with this kind of mushy, like things feel like they're becoming the same texture, but they're supposed to be different textures, and it just feels off. So yeah, as we are getting to the end here, I just wanted to thank you guys all again for sticking with me. I know I didn't have much content last month. I've got a couple things in the works, but yeah, it's been I have really been feeling the burnout really hard these last couple months. I'm gonna make a dedicated video just on that topic. I've got a cool tutorial coming on how to diffuse your lights, like on a really low budget, and you know, I'm gonna be painting up the Marvel Crisis Protocol miniatures and trying to record as much of that as I possibly can for all of you guys. And you know, I know these times too have been crazy. So, and this is something that I did when I was in the Marine Corps. So please, if you can at all possible, stay home. But yeah, stay safe out there, everybody. And thank you for being a pirate on my pirate crew. Happy painting. Bye.